Well, good morning, everyone. I'm John Hatfield. I'm a member of the board here at the Community Foundation, chairman of the Philanthropic Services Committee. I want to welcome you. Thank you all for coming. Just briefly, last year the Community Foundation, either directly or through donor-advised funds, made about $16.5 million worth of grants. And in 2011, as in most years, education was really the largest area of basic philanthropic interest and investment by our donors and the foundation itself. And more particularly over the last 4 years, there's been an average of around $5 million worth of grants made in scholarships to students heading off to college or to organizations engaged in preparing kids to go off to school. So in that regard, I think it's particularly appropriate that we end the impact, it is the last of the impact, that we end the Impact Philanthropy series with a discussion of education that we're about to enjoy. So again, thank you all for coming, and I'd like to introduce Aaron Drury, who is a philanthropic advisor here, who will introduce the speakers.
Thanks, John. So thank you all for coming. We have some people online listening via webinar. We hope today that you'll take away a lot of great information. We have a great panel of experts in higher education here today. Each speaker will speak for about 10 to 15 minutes. We ask that you hold your questions till the end. We'll have about 10 to 15 minutes at the end for questions, so just write it down and remember them. We'll also take questions on the webinar, so if people will type in their questions, then we can ask those live. We are videotaping the presentation as well, so it'll be put up on our website, so you can share it with your friends and colleagues and people you think would be interested in this topic. So our panel today is Jack Harris, who's with Junior Achievement, who's the president there. Zenith Houston, who's our executive director of Posse Atlanta. Dana Rickman, who's the director of policy and research for the Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education. And then Larry Shaw, who's the president of Oglethorpe University. We tried to get a mix of organizations that all feed into each other really nicely. So with that, we'll start with Dana with the Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education.
Thank you very much. I think I'm supposed to, there we go. First, I'd like to thank the Community Foundation for having us all here this morning and for hosting this discussion. I think it's a real important discussion, and I'm looking forward to it very much. As I was just introduced, I'm Dana Rickman. I'm the Policy Director for the Georgia Partnership for Excellence in Education. The partnership was founded in 1992. This is our 20th anniversary year, so we're very excited about that. And we were formed as a collaboration between the Georgia Chamber of Commerce and the Georgia Economic Developers Association. Our purpose really is that the belief that for a strong business, economic, vital state, we need a strong educational system. And so the Georgia Partnership really looks for education reform that will give us a strong educational base for creating a great workforce, for attracting businesses, and for the economic health of the state. And so that's what we do. Where we focus our work, we focus across the entire what we call the birth to work pipeline. We look at early childhood all the way through post-secondary work and career. Now, there's several layers to the pipeline that we talk about and think about, and the first is the pipe itself. That really is how children and students move, hopefully seamlessly, without too much obstruction, through the pipeline in an efficient manner. But then there are what we call insulating layers that really provide insulation around the pipeline to keep kids from falling out, to reduce the leaks in the pipeline. If you think about your plumbing, you don't want water leaking out. And there's two levels of insulation. There are learning and social supports, and you see examples up there from civic opportunities to job training, but there's also essential community supports for families and children going through the educational system, everything from transportation to financial supports for kids and families. And for the philanthropic community, you guys have a role to play within the pipeline and how to insulate the pipeline. And so what we want to talk about today is really focusing on that end of the pipeline, how we efficiently and successfully get kids from the K-12 system into post-secondary, into work, into career, how to do that efficiently and how to do that without losing a lot of kids along the way. And so what I want to talk about today is really give sort of a broad overview to where we are as a state, how we're doing at that end of the pipeline, some of the consequences if we really don't pay attention to that end of the pipeline, and then some broad policy things that the state is doing to sort of set the stage for our discussion today. So what do we look like? We look okay. The Georgia high school graduation rate, if you look at this slide over the past 5 years, we do pretty well. The way we're currently measuring high school graduation, we have about 80% of our students graduating. However, if we look at the other side of that number, over the past 5 years, cumulatively, we've got about 120,000 young people that are not graduating high school. What do we do about that? What do we think about, 120,000 17 to 21-year-olds that are not prepared for work, they're not prepared for college. Many of them are becoming unwed mothers, teenage mothers. What kind of effect does that have? And so I think any discussion about higher education, really we need to think about what about these 120,000 young people who are not engaged in the educational system, and how do we re-engage them? This slide really looks at something I think we all know and understand, how levels of education really pays. Compare educational attainment to income and also employment. Currently, this slide is from September 2011. You had an unemployment rate of about 13% if you did not have a high school diploma, and your weekly median earnings was about $450. If you compare that to someone with, even some college, these are annual earnings up there, over a lifetime, that difference is going to be about $500,000. And so you think about the effect on an individual. If you don't have a high school diploma, how are you going to buy a car? How are you going to buy a house? Thinking about the debt that that individual is accumulating to provide for their family, and they're more likely to be unemployed. So if they have a debt, they're unemployed, how are they going to pay that debt? And so you see some compounding factors, and then how does that affect a region or a community if you have a high percentage of people who are not making a lot of money, who incur a lot of debt? And this is just another slide that really illustrates the same thing, but it looks at more for trends. So you have unemployment rates by education level. And so you look at the unemployment rate before the economy really tanked. So you go back to sort of January 2007, January 2008, and you're looking at pretty stable unemployment. It's starting to tick up a little bit for high school dropouts, but you have about a 5 percentage point difference between the unemployment rates for a high school dropout versus a bachelor degree or higher. But then we look at what happens when the economy really went south and the disproportionate effect it had on those with lower educational attainment. So when we get to January 2012, which is when now the economy is, from what I understand, turning around and everything's going to be fine now, we have over 13% unemployment and close over 8% unemployment for those high school dropouts, high school graduates. And what concerns me the most about this slide, there's a lot that concerns me about this slide, but if you go back to before the recession hit, only 5% difference, which is a bit of a difference, but that difference has doubled now. You're looking at close to a 10% difference in unemployment rate between a high school dropout and someone with a bachelor's degree or higher. And so those unemployment levels, So now we'll look at economically, what does that mean for the sort of, break it out by the state service delivery regions. And for a moment, I want to highlight the Atlanta region because we're all in the metro area, and the Community Foundation serves Metro Atlanta. So if you look at Region 3, what are the costs of high school dropouts? This slide was done by research conducted by Georgia Southern, and it was done in 2007. So these are 2007 dollars. That $4.2 billion, that's how much just this region foregoes by not having the high school graduation rate equal to the national average of high school graduates. So if we were just able to increase our high school graduation rate to match that of the national average, the region would see an increase of $4.2 billion annually in economic outcomes for this area. And so you can see as a state, that totals up to about $18 billion, and these are annual dollars. And so this is a real economic question for the state as well as individual economic questions. And of course, individual economic outcomes become very compounded when they're applied to the community. And so we all know for individuals, lower lifetime, without lower graduation rates, lower educational attainment rates, lower lifetime earnings, decreased health status. We all know what these outcomes look like, and they translate into much higher costs for the community. For example, the criminal justice system, 80% of those incarcerated don't have a high school diploma. Those are real direct costs, both in terms of human capital and economic capital. So what are we doing about that? Well, at the partnership, one of our seminal publications, our annual publications, which you can find on our website, is the Top 10 Issues to Watch. We publish it every year. This past January in 2012, we published our 8th edition, and our top 10 issues really look at what we feel are the critical issues addressing education, facing education for this year. And we look at trends in national research, state research, what's the legislature doing, and we really try and maybe highlight some areas that we feel are important in affecting educational outcomes for kids, but maybe don't have the high profile that it should. So we try to raise up some issues as well. For this year, one of our top 10 issues was the economic development pipeline. As we've already discussed, sort of nationally, the unemployment rate for high school dropouts is twice that of college-educated people. That trend holds true in Georgia. And so what we're facing is a real mismatch between employment opportunities and our ability to fill those jobs. And so if you look at some of these numbers up here, the two middle numbers were from a study conducted by the governor's office, where by 2012, 60% of all jobs in Georgia are going to require some form of higher education. We're talking about associate's degrees, advanced degrees, 4-year degrees. Currently, only 42% of Georgians meet that requirement. So we're looking at a skills gap. And this is a real problem for both the unemployed and for the state's economic health in general. So what's causing that skills gap? Well, again, back to our pipeline. The current state of the pipeline. This is a slide used by the Technical College System of Georgia, and it really looks at on-time graduation rates. And so this would be assuming a 4-year or 2-year cycle. If you look on average, if you take 100 average 9th graders entering 9th grade at any given year, 4 years later, approximately 56 of them are going to graduate high school. Of those 56, 24 will go on to a 4-year college. Of those, only 6 will graduate on time. Of those 56 that graduated high school, an additional 13 will start a 2-year college. Of those, only 3 will graduate on time. That's a 91% loss rate. So at this point, we're not talking about leaks in a pipeline. This is a gusher of just kids falling out of that pipeline. We really need to figure out how to insulate it, how to get kids through, how to get them prepared, how to make them successful. So what are we doing about that gusher? Well, we're doing a couple things at the state level and things that I'm pretty excited about. One is you're seeing increased collaboration among early education, K-12, and higher education agencies. There's the Alliance of Education Agency Heads, which most of you are probably familiar with, that it's exactly what it is. It's all these state agency heads that deal with education. There's 7 of them, have come together, and they're really working at strengthening the whole P to 20 system. And they're working now on they're reprioritizing their strategic plan and working with the governor's office to sort of really articulate those priorities. They haven't been released yet, but it's sort of commonly accepted that they're going to be looking at strengthening early learning, supporting the race to the top, really taking a hard look at how to strengthen college and career-ready both measures and programs. And then there's, I think, teacher effectiveness is another one that's in there. But in support of the college and career ready measures and programs, Governor Deal has announced the Complete College Georgia initiative, which is really a way to streamline and strengthen the relationships between the Georgia Department of Education, the University System of Georgia, and the Technical College System of Georgia. And there's a couple different elements to it. One is a new emphasis on college readiness. Historically, the goals of a high school, how they were measured as successful, is the number of diplomas. As long as you got that kid across the stage and handed him a diploma, you were done. You were good, everything was fine. And then what happened is when a certain number of those kids got to an institute of higher education, either technical school or a four-year college, they weren't ready. They couldn't do the work. And so the institutes of higher education were spending a lot of time and money on remediation to try and get the kids ready once they were enrolled to do the work. And there is a test that the institutes of higher education give, and if a student hits below a certain score, they qualify for remediation classes. Now these classes really help the students try and catch up. They don't count toward a degree, they don't count toward credit time. And statistics show that the more likely the student has to take these classes, the less likely they are to graduate. So what the Complete College Georgia plan is really doing and really looking at is moving the burden of remediation from the higher education system back down to the K-12 system. And so they're going to start giving that remediation test, for lack of a better word, much earlier, 9th grade, 10th grade, to really identify those students who seem like they may be on track for graduation. They may get that diploma, but they don't really know what they need to know to be ready. And so this involves an honest conversation between all three agencies about what it takes to be ready, what the kids need to be scoring. And so if students are not doing well on that test, they'll get their own personalized plan for remediation while they're still in high school to try and get them better prepared for when they come out. Conversely, on the other end, for students that are really exceeding and doing well in high school, they're working on offering a lot more dual enrollments. Students who are still in high school can take college classes and really zip them through that pipeline and don't have them sort of treading water in high school where they're bored, they're not challenged, they're disinterested, things of that nature. They're also looking at improved pathways towards degree, and here degree we're talking about are degrees of higher education. A lot of times where students get tripped up is they go to a two-year college and when they transfer to a four-year college, credits don't transfer. They end up taking the same class 2 times and it really slows them down. So they're working on articulation agreements between the two-year college system and the four-year college system to really try and streamline that process. Another area that's really related to all of this is the competitiveness initiative. Last year, the governor called on the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, who the chamber went around and did listening tours of government, community, public officials to say what can make Georgia competitive economically. And they talked a lot about the stuff that you would think of: transportation, innovation, business, all of that kind of thing. But the number one thing that really came out of that was the community's focus on education and workforce development. How do we strengthen the workforce development pipeline? And they had a couple of recommendations that were published. Competitiveness Initiative, you can go online and find the report. It was made available this past January. One is increased post-secondary attainment, which they feel that they're beginning to address with the Complete College Georgia program. Two more that came out of that was to get kids ready for careers, like to have their education tied to a career at the end of the line. And also to really get the education system tied more directly into workforce development, local industry, local businesses. For those two goals, they hope to really address those one way through the Go Build Georgia initiative. That was announced by the governor in his State of the State address this past January. And what Go Build Georgia does is really get high school students especially into the skill building, into the advanced skills to really sell careers such as welding, electrician, plumber, all of those skills that you don't necessarily need a 4-year degree, but you do need a high technical level of training. And these jobs actually pay very well, and so they're looking to really make children and their families aware of options that are out there. If a 4-year college is not for you, there are other options that can help build the state's workforce, but actually pay really well and can pay for a family supporting career. And so those are just some of the things that Georgia is doing to really try and shore up that pipeline and get kids through, graduated, into work, being productive. And so if you go on our website at gpee.org, you can find our top 10 issues to watch, but also other publications, and learn more about the partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Dana. I think one of the neat things, and we work closely with the Georgia Partnership, and so what you'll see from some of the slides and things that I'll present is that there's definitely some themes that carry over, especially related to the whole idea of the pipeline. And Junior Achievement specifically focuses on the K-12 years of that pipeline. And our overall mission is really about bridging the business and the education communities to ensure that the next generation of youth has the knowledge, the skills, the capacity to succeed and thrive in today's economy. And one of the pieces to be able to do that is related to post-secondary enrollment and high school graduation. So for us, as we look at across our landscape with JA, and the 3 large barriers that we see to today's youth related to being able to drive their own success fall into these 3 buckets. There's a whole issue around financial illiteracy, which is well documented now, and especially we see what's happened with that from an adult level. What's interesting, though, is I'll talk specifically here about how that relates to post-secondary enrollment, and specifically how that relates to moving students through that pipeline of post-secondary graduation. Post-secondary enrollment we talked about, and then there's another piece here about the overall skills gap for the 21st century workforce. So with financial literacy, one of the things that's really interesting to us is outside of the fact that most students and most adults today don't necessarily know just the basic concepts around budgeting, savings, investing, pros and cons of credit, all those various pieces. One of the outcomes of that is that actually more students drop out of college for teen accumulated debt than for academic reasons, which is really interesting, and it comes in a number of different ways. Part of that is just through student loans that will accumulate. Part of that also is just through credit card debt that accumulates, and if we think of any one of us that has known anyone to step onto a college campus in the past 10, 15 years, credit cards are there to meet you as soon as as soon as you get there, and it's a huge issue. It really is, and there's more and more research that's uncovering that. With post-secondary enrollment, as Dana mentioned, so I'll just briefly kind of back up what she said, that only 40% of Georgia youth are moving on to post-secondary education, and that statistic, as far as I know, is inclusive of any form of post-secondary education. And so that's 2-year, 4-year, it's any further accreditation after high school. And then as it relates to the skills gap piece of this, as Dana mentioned, this becomes increasingly important because the number of jobs that are available for students that do not have a post-secondary degree of some kind is dwindling quickly. And related to that is that also more and more employers, not only are they looking for skills in educational attainment, they're also looking for a set of skills in innovation and problem solving, creativity, critical thinking, higher level thinking skills that will be helped by moving through higher education, especially 4-year universities at the same time. So in our work, we look at some of the root causes, and each of these issues is incredibly complex. These are not the only root causes by any means, but what these highlight are some of the root causes where we feel like in JA's work, we have a direct impact on. And then in working with collaboration with others, we're able to move the needle forward on some of these pieces. So when it comes to financial literacy, the main root cause here is just that it's not being taught. Most of us would feel like the right time to teach financial literacy education would be within the classroom environment, kind of K through 12, but only 14% of students are actually receiving it. Less than 50% of students receive any sort of financial education in their own homes. So when parents are surveyed, and that crosses all socioeconomic demographics, that oftentimes it's just sort of assumed that financial education topics will be taught in the classroom, and so they're not taught at home, and it kind of multiplies. And then even when it is taught in the classroom, many teachers, large majority of teachers, don't necessarily feel competent or adequately prepared to actually teach that. When it comes to the whole issue around graduation rates and post-secondary enrollment, host of different root causes here, but one of the ones that always keeps popping up is this idea of a disconnection of the relevance of school to a student's individual future success. And I think what is most interesting about this is that in recent years, the research has really uncovered that this process of disengagement really happens in the middle grades. So I remember 5-7 years ago when the whole issue of graduation rates really started popping up, the focus went towards high school. We all just felt like, okay, if we focus in at 10th through 12th, we reach students just as they're about to graduate from high school, get them inspired, get them prepared, that they'll move on. When in reality, by the time a student gets to 10th grade, it's kind of baked in as to whether or not they're going to graduate. And we're losing so many students between the 8th and 9th grade transition point, and in those middle grades is really where we're seeing some of that disconnect. And that last point that's on this slide is just that a lot of that has only been heightened by the fact that we have had legislation on a national level that has narrowed curriculum, that has created the high stakes testing environment so that there is teaching to the test. And when you've got teaching to the test, the idea of relevance gets pushed out even further. And so it kind of has had a compounding effect. For JA, in terms of kind of knowing what we can do and also knowing what we can't do, we really focus in on impacting the attitudes and the aspirations that drive student behaviors leading to higher academic performance. There's 3 areas to this. At our heart, we're an education organization. We have high quality, practical, hands-on, turnkey curriculum that really focuses in on financial literacy and work readiness and career pathways, entrepreneurship. But we couple that with the engagement of the business community. So every single JA curriculum that's ever delivered within a classroom environment is always done by a volunteer from the business community. And that volunteer is able to bring that real world relevance into the classroom, is able to be that caring adult in the classroom that can help point students towards the education pathways and the career pathways that would really get them excited, that can align to their own skills and interests. And most importantly, that it just opens up the potential that's out there and kind of recognizing that from the exposure standpoint. And then as they get through middle school and high school, that we're equipping them with the real skills that will lead towards college and career readiness. Just as one statistic, the JA Fellows Program is our deepest program for high school students. And it covers high school students from all backgrounds. And so it's not just high achieving high school students, it's students across socioeconomic demographics, across grade point averages. But one of the things that continues to kind of come up as a part of this program is that outside of just, in this particular program, students are actually working in groups to create their own businesses. So they come with a business plan, they actually launch the business. But through that, there's also a keen connection of how it relates to the importance of post-secondary education. And so these are just quotes from 2 of our recent alumni, but for the first one kind of captures this idea of an imaginative barrier. And I think that that's something that exists for so many of our students, that there's an idea that imaginative barriers exist based off whatever their own background might be. And the more that at an early age we can break down those barriers and help students recognize that the potential of what our economic system offers is actually available to everybody is really, really important and can't be lost in the whole mix of this. The second quote there from another graduate just talks about the lifeline to her future. And I think that what this points out is that there's so many aspects that, Tamara and I were talking before, we fundamentally believe in the boundless potential of our youth, right? It's not that youth today are lacking in enormous amounts of potential. But what we need to be sure that we're doing is equipping them and enabling them with the right knowledge and kind of pathway to understand how to grab onto that full potential. And to provide, I think of this lifeline where somebody's just kind of step by step, hand by hand, able to be led towards a pathway that's going to be successful for them and very valuable to them. We've been growing. This is just showing in terms of reach. We serve in the Atlanta area currently about 115,000 students. We serve 155,000 students across Georgia. For the Metro Atlanta area, we're working in 300 schools, and that's 7,000 volunteers. So this is a wide grassroots effort of many different companies and individuals that are partnered with JA to deliver that curriculum and those programs to students. And then in terms of how the programs actually fit together, a huge part of what we do on the left-hand side of that, our core programs, actually happens in the school during the school day, which is a really unique aspect of what JA does. So we do have a strong after-school component, but the bulk of what JA does is actually strategically aligned with school systems to have a turnkey way of bringing business professionals into the classroom, delivering high-quality curriculum to really create that synergy so that students aren't disconnecting from school or disengaging from school. And that as they get up into the middle grades and the high school levels, we have this whole after-school pipeline of jams into fellows that allows students to take that learning deeper with a lot of mentor relationships, and that leads them through to success. And just as a point of interest here, with the JA Fellows, we stop at 12th grade. But we know that seeing them into post-secondary education is a really important thing, and so we've been very fortunate that a number of our JA Fellows have received scholarships from the Posse Foundation and have allowed those students to then have the opportunity to carry on into really unbelievable opportunities that they would not have otherwise.
Well, good morning, everyone. So you'll see some consistency here, which I guess is a good thing, but I think I have a crankier version of a story. Some might say angrier version, but it's I think I've become crankier over the last year as one listens to the sort of the level of political discourse around the issues that we're talking about today, and that's both statewide and federal. So I go back. This is the pipeline that Dana pulled out. She did it. I don't know how to do all those to get that chart up there, but this is the result of the chart. And yeah. So, I mean, you could really stop here. It's 2012. We've been talking about these issues for 50, 60, years, if not longer. And here we are. 6 out of 100. Earn a 4-year college degree, and that's in 6 years. So it's not earning it in 4 years. That's earning it in 6 years, which is sort of how we give ourselves an extra 2 years grace. Another 3 earn a 2-year degree. So it's only 9 out of 100. That's a 91% leak in the pipeline. Here's a quote that maybe you'll recognize. So I don't know whether the author of this quote thought that 6 was too high, whether his goal was 4 or 5, but when you place this quote up against the first slide, you realize that we are so far from the idea of everyone going to college, where no one is going to college and virtually no one is finishing. Here's another quote. I just did a little research, and this one was, it's 120 years old, 115, 20 years old, delivered in Atlanta, not far from where we are. And this is Booker T. Washington. And why I sort of start here is because I think that the context of where we are today goes back longer than 50 years ago. It goes back, to obviously before the Civil War and even before that. So, Booker T. Washington was on one side of this of the argument that raged then at the turn of the century. He continued during that speech what's called the Atlanta Compromise. Our greatest danger is that we may overlook the fact that the masses of us are to live by the production of our hands. The wisest among my race understand that the agitation of questions of social equality is the extremist folly. Now, his words were well received to a largely white Atlanta business community in 1895. received much better than the perspective of Washington's nemesis of the time, W.E.B. Du Bois, who was a professor at Atlanta University. And Du Bois suggested that Washington was asking black people, at least for the time being, to give up three things: to give up political power, to give up civil rights, and to give up access to higher education. And as a result of what he was asking, that in fact this had led to a sort of reversal of progress that had been made shortly after the Civil War. It had led to the disenfranchisement of blacks, particularly in the South. It had led to the legal creation of a status of civil inferiority and the steady withdrawal of aid to higher education. So this debate, again, happened more than a century ago, so why would I start here? So again, I think context is everything. So if you look over the last 30 years, the share of government funding of higher education has decreased dramatically. The share paid for by families has grown dramatically. This is just in the last 30 years. Until 1994, most state aid was awarded on the basis of need. Today, that has dropped dramatically, and Georgia is with the HOPE legislation, was the leader of this, and everybody's now copied Georgia. But this has happened on the federal level too. It was remarkable to me that on the federal level it's dropped almost in half of need-based aid. They've converted that aid, a lot of that aid is converted to loans. At our public universities, there's another remarkable statistic. 80% of students now come from the highest family income band. If you compare Oglethorpe to University of Georgia, and Oglethorpe is a small private elite college, and University of Georgia is the public flagship. We have 4 times as many students at Oglethorpe, about 35% of our students, who are Pell eligible. So they come from the lowest band of income at Georgia. It's not 10% at the University of Georgia. So it's in my view, it's beyond debate that over the last 30 years there has been a deliberate and effective public policy effort to limit access to college for low-income families. This didn't happen by accident. This is all done by legislation, but legislation's happening at the state level and the federal level, and it continues today. It's another something that the data proves out, that the greater the income inequality in America, the greater educational income inequality. It just lines up as neatly as one could imagine. Family income remains the greatest determinant of college enrollment and college completion. Here's the data. 70% of high school grads from high-income families versus 55% of high school grads from low-income families enroll in college, and a disproportionate number of the latter are in 2-year institutions. So we all know this. And so it's, what's the sad part of the story is that where college and universities used to be seen as sort of the answer to addressing the income inequality in America, they are now a part of the system of preserving class inequality in America. A third of the black students in the United States attend secondary schools that are segregated. Third of all black and Latino students attend high poverty high schools versus 4% of white students. And again, here's the trends. We made significant progress, and these trends have now been reversed. So the segregation in our public schools is increasing, and today in 2012, our public schools are more segregated than they were when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. Just astonishing to me. Whoops. So where does this leave us? So education, and particularly higher education, is the path for families, to move from one class to another class. And the data you showed about the income of families, and it is not a little bit of college. A little bit of college doesn't do much. It is completion of college. Completion of a 2-year college helps a little, but it is really completion of a 4-year college that that is the path out of either the middle income or the lower middle income or for families. Yet again, for the last 30 years, our public policy, both on the state and national level, has all been about increasing barriers to access to higher education, not removing them. And despite the sort of occasional story you hear about, someone who doesn't have a college degree and, becomes famous, which people love to sort of tell and tell again, those are rare. The only reliable way forward is a college degree. And the reason that number, is 9%, that the MELD is 91%, is not ability. It is all about opportunity, and equal opportunity in America today is a myth. If you're born to a poor mother, you're half as likely to go to college, and if you factor in the quality of the college that you go to, the odds of your having a better life than your parents are minuscule. And where students attend college is highly segregated by income, again with low-income students overrepresented in two-year schools. And if you think that where you go to college doesn't matter, then consider your own children and the efforts we spend to make sure that our children go to the best colleges that they can. That's not, we do that because we know it matters. Now, the inequality of opportunity does not start with college. It obviously starts pre-K, followed by the K-12 system. Students arrive at the gates of higher education, whether that's the public schools or private schools, with dramatic inequalities. I see them all the time. The increasing emphasis on standards and testing has not improved this at all. Dana talked about this whole remediation issue that the state is trying to address, trying to push the remediation down to high school. While that's a sort of nice concept, the fact that they're now denying access to tens of thousands of Georgia students that were able to go to college and get remediation there and have that covered and paid for, they are now, that's not being paid for there. I can pretty much guarantee you that's not going to happen in the high schools. The high schools are having a horrible job doing what they're supposed to be doing now. And so this effort this complete college Georgia, I think it's by 2020, there's supposed to be 265 more college graduates in Georgia. It's not going to happen unless the quality of unless it just becomes a diploma. And we just begin to hand out 2- and 4-year diplomas to people. We will never accomplish that. My personal view is that while the sort of reintegration of our public schools is not the answer, it is hard for me to imagine a sort of a separate but theoretically equal system accomplishing what we need to accomplish. We go back to Brown versus Board of Education 60 years ago. They recognized that 60 years ago. We don't seem to recognize that today. I think we do know what works today. I think that for a long period of time we did not know, what a good quality public education looked like. There are models of it all around. There are schools that are working. We've got Drew Charter School is around the corner. That's working. You can point to public schools, that work. We know what works. It's not a question of lack of knowledge. It's a question of lack of commitment and political will, in my view, to do this. And again, I think this is not an accident that the trends have been reversed. I think there's an intentional public policy push to continue to provide high quality of education for the wealthiest of families, and to not so much worry about everybody else. In terms of cost, I put it up there, so I'm going to have to mention it. Cost is an issue. I'll give you sort of one example. Oglethorpe, again, a private elite liberal arts college. It costs us. It's not not the sticker price, but it costs us $16,000 a year to educate a student. $16,000 a year. My alma mater, Swarthmore College, where I came from, spends $116,000. So even in the private world, there are vast differences. There are 4,000 colleges and universities out there. There's a tremendous amount of diversity. There's a tremendous amount of quality in those systems. Not consistent quality, but there's a tremendous amount of quality among those 4,000 schools. And each of us, for lots of different reasons, are very focused on this cost issue about trying to lower the cost of an education to our students. We've seen the family income of students at Oglethorpe just drop off the cliff in the last 4 years. They're trying to figure out how to maintain that at 16,000 or even lower it some, even though we're among the lowest cost providers of a private education in the region, is something that we are focused on. But you know, I sort of I'll sort of close this out with a final thought. I think that there's lots of people that do good work in this realm, and a number of them are sitting here and are able to point to to accomplishment, to measures, and to how bad things would be if they weren't here, and the lack of opportunity. But the system is broken, and we can help patch it, but none of us at this table are fixing the system, and the system needs to be fixed at a public policy level, and today anyway you don't see much effort there, and the effort you do see is a continued push, I think, to deny access to the people, so that that 9 out of 100 in 5 years from now, it's still going to be 9 out of 100 based on what I see Georgia doing. That's my view. Cheers.
Thank you. So, what a sobering reminder of just kind of the impact and just the importance of all of the collaborative efforts that are taking place around higher education here, not just in Atlanta, but just across the country. So Posse and the Posse Foundation, talk a little bit about that. I'll share some slides and kind of what we've done, but while we're not the solution to all of the problems, we represent just one piece of the pie, where we're trying to collaboratively work with schools, high schools across the country, other community-based organizations, and we're fortunate to have some really key college and university partnerships that help us to do what we do. But just to kind of give you a little bit about the Posse Foundation and how and what, who we are, I'll start with just the mission, and our mission simply is to identify, recruit, and train incredible young leaders from urban public high schools and send them in posses to top colleges and universities. And so we started in 1989 simply by our founder, Debbie Beal, who was working with students at the time, and she asked one student, why did he not finish college? And he simply said, I would have finished school if I had my posse with me. And so while it's a term as we think about kind of Western posse, we all, through our own lives and even currently now, have what we consider our posse, the people who support us and provide that support. So, so that's essentially the Posse Foundation at our beginning. So this is what a typical posse looks like. It is a diverse group of students from across the country who go off to, now we have a total of 40 partner colleges and universities. Doesn't include some of our other partners there, but there are 3 main goals with the Posse Foundation. One is for us to expand the pool of candidates from which top colleges select their student bodies. The second is to build stronger, more interactive campus communities. And the third is to graduate scholars so they can become leaders in the workforce. There are 5 key program components that allow us to be successful with the Posse Foundation. We begin with, some of you in the room have participated in what we call our DAP. So at Posse, we use a lot of acronyms, but I will be mindful to not speak in our own language and speak in a way that you will understand. But the DAP process is our dynamic assessment process. And it's a unique college recruitment and selection process for us, where we identify, we get a number of nominations. I'll talk a little bit more and give you the scale of what those nominations looks like. But this is the process that we, the students go through a very competitive process, and there are 4 phases of that dynamic assessment process where we drill down to identify the 10 students who become the scholars there. So I'll just give you just a brief overview of that. So we have DAP 0, which is the process that we are currently in now. And that's where we do our community outreach. We reach out to the high school guidance counselors, our community-based organizations such as Junior Achievement, to nominate students, to give you some perspective, and you'll see this a little bit later. In Atlanta, we have been here since 2007. We're in our 5th year. We now have 6 college partners in universities. We have Bard College, the College of Worcester, which is in Ohio, Brandeis University, Boston University, Syracuse, and now Texas A&M. So those are the 6. And for those 50 scholarships I'll give you for last year, we had 50 scholarship opportunities that were awarded through our partner colleges and university. We had over 820 nominations. So as you can imagine, it is a very competitive process. And then we go through kind of DAT 1, where we bring them in for group interviews. Many of you, again, have participated in that. From that, we take that 820, divide them in groups of 100 to 125, do a group interview process with them. After that, that group is divided probably into about 50%, and then we invite those students in for one-on-one interviews. From there, the students are selected. We select up to 25 finalists for that process, and it is from that finalist pool, the 25, where we bring in our college partner and university, and they come in together with our Posse team to select the 10 students who make up the scholars that go on campus. So once they are selected, the group of 10, we take them through an 8-month pre-collegiate process. So that process will start, DAP starts in a couple of weeks. That process will go through December, when the students are announced that they are awarded a Posse scholarship. In the end of January, we begin an 8-month extensive pre-collegiate training program, where at that time our scholars go through everything from dealing with societal issues to what campus life is on it's like on the college campus, to we have an extensive writing program which we prepare them to be critical thinkers, writers, and they also begin to just talk about how their leadership and their ability to be a change agent, if you would, not only on the college campus, but also just in general in the larger community, where that comes in. And through that 8-month process, we are also building that Posse, that they become a very strong cohort that will continue to support them throughout the year. And then we do summer retreats. There are a lot of different components to the 8-month, but they're pretty prepared, we think, before they even step foot onto the college campus to begin that process. And then we have the 4-year campus program. And in that 4-year campus program, we continue to follow them. We continue to have trainers who are assigned, as well as a career program manager. We do visits in the spring and the fall. One of the things about the campus program is, particularly in the 1st and 2nd year, each Posse group is assigned a mentor. That mentor actually meets that group in the summer before they go to campus. And they meet with them weekly. They go through, again, some of the things that we do in the pre-collegiate training program. We also, each early January through April of each year, do what we call Posse Plus retreats, and that is where the students select a topic that is of interest to them, and we conduct this year I think we did 39 or so of those, and the topic this year was around gender and sexuality. And so it's an opportunity for them to talk about what's happening on their community, on their campuses, but also just what's happening in a broader sense there. And we followed them for the 4 years. And so those 3 components, in addition to our career and alumni program, beginning their freshman, even pre-collegiate training, their freshman, sophomore year, our career program manager is on site and working with them to have them in internships in the summer. So right now we're trying to create those opportunities for them. And we're really proud that this year we now will have an alumni program. Our first two posses will graduate from the College of Worcester and Boston University this year. So we are working to build that alumni program. And we're really excited about creating that pipeline, if you would, for the workforce here in Atlanta. And then we also have something that we call Posse Access. So for the students, many have asked, for those students out of the 25 who don't get selected to join a posse, what happens to those students? So a couple of years ago, we created what's called Posse Access. And it gives our college and university partners the opportunity to take a look at a national pool of prospective scholars that once the students have gone through the dynamic assessment process, it opens up probably about a week or so after those finalist meetings. And any of our college partners and universities can go into this database and identify students there. While they may not receive the Posse Scholarship, there are other opportunities for them to go into higher ed. So Posse success factors, why do we think we are successful? Our first is our alternative recruitment and selection model. The dynamic assessment process is a very critical point, and we put a lot of emphasis on identifying what a Posse Scholar is, and then what that means for us to determine the successful factors with that. It is important to note that we are not a need-based scholarship. We are leadership and merit-based. So we look at the entire picture of a student and look at what is, what is going to make them successful, and will they be a Posse Scholar, and how will they form in terms of having success on campus. Our cohort model of sending students in a group of 10 where they support each other, they lean on each other to provide not only academic, but also the overall support that one would need going through 4-year. We also look at the preparation. We spend a lot of time preparing them, preparing their families, and also just being available to the students year-round throughout their 4-year. We have the campus support piece, which is really strong. Each one of our colleges and university, there's a liaison, but there's typically a team of individuals who are also working, including faculty and staff that work to support the scholars there. We also provide the career support that provides them with job training, job access, and so we think that that's a real critical. And then also scholarship is very key and important to us. And then the real basis for everything that we do is we operate from a strength-based model. So everything that we do is based on that, and those are some of our key success factors. So just to look at Posse and where we are across the country, we started New York, there's Boston, Chicago, Los Angeles. I keep clicking here, we show Atlanta, Miami, New Orleans, and our newest site is Houston, which we will open that office this spring. Okay, we're currently recruiting for that team. So let's look at just Posse expansion in general. We began in 1989 in New York, and now in 2012 we are in 9 cities. And so our goal is to be in our 10th city soon. Don't know what city that is, but we're excited about just our growth over the last couple of years. Okay. Over the last 6 years, look at our nominations, and this is nationally. When you look at our 40 college partners and universities, and in the 8 cities, what this is based on, there are over 14,000 nominations for the slots that we have here. And as I mentioned here, for this year with Texas A&M, we will have 60 scholarships that will be awarded through our college and university partners, and we will have over 900 nominations for that process. In terms of scholars selected to date, if you could see these numbers, there's over 4,000 scholars who have been selected and are currently in our Posse pipeline. There's been $485 million awarded in scholarships to date. And just to talk about our comprehensive partner network, a key part of that is the colleges and university partners that we have. They actually award the scholarships to our students, and we provide, if you would, kind of the wraparound and additional support that's through there. Our schools and community-based organizations are very key. We cannot be successful with the type of students who are nominated to Posse without our schools and community-based organization. And we spend a lot of time really building those relationships, really helping nominators to understand what a Posse Scholar is and what we're looking for. Corporations have been very key to that. They allow us the ability to do a lot of what we do outside of the award that the colleges and university provides. And also foundations have been very, very key in terms of our impact and our success. This is just a list of our college partners and universities, colleges and universities to date. As I mentioned earlier, we have 40 partners. We also have several graduate school partnerships, and that list is growing as we talk. And so while it does not offer a full scholarship award as the undergrad program does, many of them, the partnerships are established to provide them with either a fellowship or partial financial support during graduate school. We have, this is just a list of our career partners here, and we have several key partners who are here in Atlanta. Some of those which are national organizations also have key relationships here in Atlanta. And our career partners provide those summer internship as well as postgraduate opportunities for our scholars. Points of pride for us, 23 years of Posse. Earlier this year, we did an alumni report, 20 years of fulfilling the impact of Posse. I have a few copies of that, but you can also go to our website, possefoundation.org, and download a copy of that. But it really shows the impact of where our scholars are 20 years after we started, and so I'll just lift a few of those points. We have a 90% persistent in graduation rate, and so we're really proud of that. President Obama shared part of his Nobel Peace Prize with the Posse Foundation. We have had no red ink year. We have been in the black since we first began. We are the most well-known program of our kind in the United States, and the only program of our kind with this support that we are aware of. We have 40 partners, 61 total partnerships, multi-city partners, which is about 42%. 17 of those, and what that means for us with multi-city partners is that the college and university, for example, here in Atlanta, Syracuse is a tri-city partner, meaning that not only do they recruit students from Atlanta, but they also recruit students from Miami and Los Angeles. And so if it's a tri-city or a dual city, meaning that they Bard College here recruits from Atlanta as well as from New Orleans. And so we work together with those colleges and universities. Just to give you a little bit, scholars by race, this is what our 2011 scholars by race breaks down. Scholars by sex, about a 50-50 breakdown there. Again, leadership, that's another key piece. That's another posse there. Actually, that's one of our posses from the College of Worcester. I had to look at the students' faces 4 years later. They've kind of matured, so I had to look at the faces there. And 79% of our Posse Scholars have held former leadership positions in campus organizations. Many of them have created and started new organizations on their campus to address some type of community and or societal issue there. So we're really proud of that. The breakdown of job industries for Posse alumni, as you see, it's no surprise that some of the majority of them in education and nonprofit work, but there are also some other key areas where our scholars and our alumni are. Today, 41% of Posse alumni who have been out of college for 2 or more years are currently in or have already completed a graduate program. So not only are they matriculating through undergrads, but they are also going on to pursue higher degrees of education. Okay. And here are kind of the key areas of graduate degrees for Posse alumni by field. Okay. And this is just kind of sort of an overview of just the impact of Posse and our most recent, where we've been in the news or in the media there. And thank you.
Okay, well, I'll kick off our Q&A portion. We're right on time, so that's perfect. I guess you all come from very different perspectives, but all very concentrated on higher education. I would love to hear sort of, if you could change one thing that you think would have a really major impact, what would it be? And it could be anywhere in the pipeline. It doesn't have to be in your field.
I'll start. I think, you know, at a more ground level than the policy level, I think that there's an enormous opportunity for exposure for students, and which then leads to access. I think that for the majority of today's students coming through middle school and high school, they still don't have any idea about the types of opportunities that exist and the breadth of possibilities that there are for higher education. And I think being able to kind of go in and solve that piece and increase student motivations related to exposure, that then will lead to greater demand on some of the access pieces too.
I was just going to say that I would probably add to what you just said, Jack. I think that exposure and early exposure is really key. There are scholars that come through the Posse Foundation who have an idea of college, want to go to college, but don't necessarily have the opportunity to go. And so we create that opportunity through them, through our partnerships. But I think the earlier we begin to have those conversations, particularly in communities where there is a lower probability or the likelihood that those students will go to school, I think the more success we will begin to see on the back end. The other piece of that is it's critical for you know, for donors and for organizations like the Community Foundation to begin to create those opportunities for scholarship. And that's a very critical piece of access to higher education.
My wife and I were talking the other night about the you know, America's involvement in wars in the last however many years, and you know, we both sort of believe that, you know, if our children were fighting in those wars, we would have been out of those countries a long time ago. That's our answer there, is if they would, you know, impose the universal draft again, the war would end in a minute. And I think that, you know, in the same way, that's you know, I think that's true about education. If our kids were in the Atlanta public schools, we wouldn't tolerate it. And so I don't know how you get there, but it's a question of finding a way to have you know, the American children educated largely in the same system, and if one would do that, the system would change.
Yeah, it's hard to pick one thing, and I agree with all of I think the student engagement in the one system. In an attempt to step way outside the box, I would say increase focus on prenatal care. That it is a pipeline, and it does start at birth, and not to write off the kids currently in the pipeline, because that clearly is not the answer, but I think the most common thing that I've heard to increase high school graduation rate is increase prenatal care and cut down on early term births, and, you know, the health of the mother, and really focus on the family.
Other questions? Bob?
About 10 years ago, Community Foundation Advisory Committee on a grant, we went to an elementary school that I think was Avondale Elementary School, which at that point in time had a huge and growing number of folks from other countries who had come to us one way or another and didn't have language skills. The children were learning to some extent, but the families were not. And Avondale went out and created a parental support organization where they actually got some funds and brought parents into the school, showed them what was going on, persuaded them in the importance of supporting their kids. And so my question really is, because I heard the word home or family or education one time in this whole presentation, it's not in your pipeline. Have we given up on family support entirely so that everything that we need to do from a governmental point of view leaves the family out? Or is there some way of boosting up that support at the family level that I don't perceive schools can be successful when they've got 50 or 60% of students down at the elementary level who do not have parental support?
The family is in our pipeline. It's part of the insulation and part of the, you really need to support the family in terms of access and things that they need. Sort of community involvement, financial stability, social services, things of all of that nature is part of the insulation. I agree with you wholeheartedly in what Avondale was talking about. One of the things that the partnership is doing, we just recently received a grant from the Goizueta Foundation to really look at raising the academic attainment of Hispanic students. And so in our sort of preliminary planning process to figure out what we were going to do and go into communities, we really looked at what's the greatest barrier that Hispanic students see in higher education, especially first generation, where English is not spoken in the home, that sort of thing. And what we have found so far is that it's not the fact that they're not fluent in English. That's not the biggest barrier. It's the fact that their parents or their families don't speak English, really. And so the family cannot, parents generally know what their child needs. They know when their child is struggling and they want the best for their child, but if they're not able to communicate appropriately with the teacher about what they feel their child needs, they're not the best advocate for their child. They can't be, because they don't have the communication skills. Like, they know what needs to be done, but they're having trouble communicating with the schools. That's a much bigger barrier, is the lack of that parent advocate for that child to succeed than if the child is fluent in English or not. And so those family issues are so important, and the family engagement and the parent engagement is so important to educational attainment that it just can't be pushed enough, I think.
I have a related question and comment, because I've worked in the inner city with a lot of these young kids running a nonprofit, and I still have to come back to this, because what I've seen is you can do all this great work and build this best school in a particular type of neighborhood, but if the young person has to come home and be subjected to all of the stuff that's going on with the parent, the ability for them to pull themselves out of that is minimal. And I see very little things. I mean, we're working on a project, but I see very little things that are willing to just say, you know what? At some point, the parents aren't prepared, they can't be prepared, and you got to make a choice. Either you save this kid or you save this parent. If you can do both, that'd be fantastic, but there's a psychological thing that's going on that a lot of people don't want to talk about that ends up transferring over to the kid if they're in that environment. And some of the kids that are even in the program that we're working on right now, even though they don't spend the week at home, they spend the week away in an appropriate environment, the phone calls, the stuff still comes because of what's happening at home, and they are not able to detach themselves away from what's happening in the family, even when they're not physically there, because they have that psychological connection to the family. What do we propose to do about that? Because in some levels it feels kind of, are you ripping the kids away from the family? But at some levels you have to rip the kid away from the family if this kid is going to have a chance to be able to evolve in a way where that's not the normal. that's not reality, because until you can change the reality of the kid to say, you know, a situation like what Posse is doing is great, you're reinforcing their reality with positive relationships. But until you can do that and get those kids to that point, you're still losing them. What do we do with that?
Sure, I would just share just from Posse perspective how we engage the families. And you know, one of the critical things for us is to continue to provide that support base throughout the 4 years. But even before then, when a student is notified that they are finalists, we hold a family meeting. And we talk about what it means to be a Posse Scholar, what will that mean in terms of the commitment. Because while it is a scholarship, Posse Foundation is also a program. We like to say it's a movement as well. And so we want them to understand what the commitment is. We're committed to their success, so this is a partnership. It's a partnership between the family, the Posse Foundation, and the scholars who are selected there, in addition to our colleges and universities and their support team there. And we do several family meetings. So when they become a finalist, we have a family meeting there before they are announced that they are awarded the scholarship. Immediately in January, before they go to the pre-collegiate training, we do another family meeting. We talk to them about financial aid, about how you're going to fund, because the scholarship only covers their full tuition. So we guide them through the financial aid process, how to look for other sources of funding, how will they support that student. And some of them, while we're not a need-based scholarship, there are many of our scholars who qualify for need-based scholarship. And so we walk them through that process. Many of them are first-generation scholars. So many of their parents have not had the experience of higher ed. So we answer those questions as well. We also bring in specifically for questions around financial aid. Usually many of the colleges and partner university representatives will bring someone here to Atlanta. They do one-on-one meetings with each family to talk about what their financial snapshot is. Here's the award from the college. How do we fill that gap? What are the other things there? And then before they go off to college, we do what we call Posse Olympics. We bring the family together for a fun-filled day. And then just throughout the 4 years, we continue to support the scholar through that. We can't address those issues that they go back to in their homes and their families, particularly when they are away from Atlanta, but we do try to support them, and that's where our team, my team, the Atlanta team, our trainers, our program director, we do campus visits. We check in on them. We have those conversations. How are you doing academically? How are you doing? How are you involved? How are your grades going? And so while we do not provide some of those support services, we work with the colleges and universities. So when I talk about the mentors in their first, second year who are there, that's where the support comes in to help them through that. Because you're right, there could be challenges that are happening at home that could be a distractor. So when we're noticing those flags in their academic, we get a semester report every semester. So we know when there are issues that are going on with the student. And so we're immediately there. If that means that I get a call today from Boston University and we have a student who is on the brink of being in trouble academically, I'm on a plane. One of our team members are on a plane, and we're there talking to that scholar, coaching them through how do we get you here. We have had some students to go through what we call an off-campus campus program, our OCC program. And that's where a scholar may have to come home. Either it is by their own that they need to address some issue, or the college partner university feel like it's in their best interest to take a semester off. So when they come back here, we don't just leave them there. We have a plan of action. Here's the problem. How are we going to get you back on campus? They don't lose their scholarship in many cases, so that scholarship retains. But many of them will enroll, say, at one of the local colleges and universities here to continue so that they can academically persist through that. And so I can go on and on about what we do, but we do have some built-in elements to make sure that they have the opportunity to succeed at every level.
And I do think the obstacles are it's amazing anybody can get through them. But you do look at places like KIPP and who are serving those same, they're serving those same students who have the same issues and have the same family issues, and schools like KIPP can succeed, and the kids in schools like KIPP can succeed. So I don't think it's insurmountable. I do think it's amazing what a good school can do.
Other questions?
This is for Larry. One of the things, and something you've heard about a lot, is concern with the rising cost of higher education, obviously how that impacts accessibility. We have found traditionally college has been pretty resistant to change, to cutting costs, but now as student debt's increasing, as colleges are really forced to give really too much in institutional aid, do you see colleges becoming more open to thinking creatively about ways to cut costs? And I do know that Oglethorpe, I know, has always done that, but.
Yeah, I think I was at a meeting with, I think, about 50 either university presidents and system-wide presidents in Pennsylvania the other day, and from schools, from very high-priced, elite schools that are charging $60,000 a year, and they're even they're beginning to talk about can we provide the first 2 years of our college online, because we need to find a way to reduce costs. So I think the cost has become such a big issue that lots of people are getting creative about it. On the other hand, in the system, there's always going to be room for a George Washington that could charge you $60,000 a year and lower cost providers. So cost is an issue, but for the families that we're talking about, there has to be public support for their children to go to school, because whether it's $5,000, whether the tuition's $5,000 or $10,000 or $15,000 or $50,000, they can't go.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay. Well, I'd like to thank our panel. As you know, this is an important issue to the Community Foundation. We have 28 scholarships here. The donors have started, and so we're in the process now of starting to look at those students and award scholarships. But I know personally I feel very grateful and thankful to have these group of leaders, smart, articulate people in our community leading us on this issue. So join me in thanking them for coming and presenting. And then finally, if you need contact information, or you want to get materials or get in touch with these people, just let your philanthropic advisor or any of us know on staff, and we'll make that connection for you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.